Hi, I'm Mindy, and welcome back. Wherever you're watching or listening, I'm so glad you're here. I'm reading my debut book, 23 Ways to Leave, and today is chapter 11, Leaving with Boundaries, Cutting the Emotional Cord. It didn't start with a big argument, a breakup text, or some explosive fight. It started with a quiet click, the next video in the YouTube algorithm. I had just gotten out of the shower, wrapped myself in a towel, and sat on the edge of the bed, still dripping a little, scrolling mindlessly. I wasn't even searching for help. I didn't type in how to stay married to an asshole or why do I feel crazy in this relationship. I was just scrolling. But somehow a video popped up about narcissism and codependency, and I clicked. And then I clicked another and another, and I began to cry. Not the kind of cry that makes you feel hopeless, but the kind that feels like clarity, like a key finally turning in a locked door. Something shifted in me. I remember pausing one video and whispering, "Holy shit, it's not just me." It seemed like my algorithm was catching up faster than I was. That was the summer that I learned to stop arguing with him so much. I got my YouTube University degree in narcissism / codependency and all of the ways that you can deal with it. Or at least I watched enough YouTube videos that it felt like I was earning a 4-year degree. I started meeting his wild demands and desires with less and less emotion. I stopped trying to convince him to see me and started doing things that were just for me. I quit letting myself spiral into those exhausting conversations that left me more confused than when I walked away I was when it started. The word salad, those nonsensical conversations from hell, became more and more one-sided as I learned to let the words roll off of me. I didn't announce anything. I just slowly stopped feeding the dynamic that was keeping me sick. I began to realize I had more control than I thought. When I stopped reacting emotionally, things started to change. And it felt unnatural at first, but I could feel how much safer I really was when I stopped playing his mind games. No more big dramatic reactions and no more bait, no more feeding on the bait. And the thing is, I was still in the relationship. I hadn't left yet. I was still playing the part, doing laundry, fixing dinner, trying to keep everything together. But something inside of me was finally breaking free. I was emotionally detaching long before I packed a bag or told him I was done. I started seeing the space between us instead of feeling like we were one tangled, painful knot. Looking back, that was the moment I began to leave. Not with a suitcase goodbye or any kind of announcement, but with a boundary. Those early days of YouTube research don't stand out in my mind quite as much as the memory of that birthday morning realization that kicked off the journey, but they were just as important. Learning what kind of tactics I had been manipulated with was just one part of it. I knew that in order to make my life better, whether I stayed or left, I had to learn how to be safe around him. Because even if we weren't married, I still planned to co-parent with him after the divorce. So how do you keep someone like that in your life once you realize you don't want to continue in the same relationship with them? What if it's someone you can't just cut out completely? Someone you share custody with, a blood family member, or even a boss or coworker? Then what? How can you ever be emotionally safe around someone who treats you like it's your job to make them happy? Why boundaries feel so hard in the first place? It's wild how something that feels so simple, like just not responding or saying no, can feel like you're breaking some sacred law you didn't even agree to in the first place. That's because most of us who struggle with boundaries were never taught what healthy ones look like. We were trained to merge, to accommodate, to avoid conflict at all cost, to anticipate other people's moods and needs so that we could shape shift fast enough to avoid being a problem. We learn to regulate our nervous systems by managing everyone else's emotions. We called it love, but it was actually survival. So, of course, it feels hard. Of course, your body resists it because boundary setting requires you to choose you, even when someone else is angry, disappointed, confused, or trying to guilt you back into line. And if that person has benefited from your lack of boundaries for years, oh, you can bet they'll fight because boundaries threaten their comfort. They expose the imbalance your silence once protected. They disrupt the status quo of your relationship, especially the one that kept them satisfied and you suffering in silence. You might worry that setting a boundary makes you mean or cold, but let me remind you of something I had to remind myself 100 times during that summer. Boundaries aren't for anyone else but you. They're not punishment, they're protection. Boundaries don't make you cruel, they make you clear. And they don't push people away, they reveal who was never safe to let in the first place. And when it's someone that you can't walk away from completely, like a co parent, a family member, maybe someone you work with, that's when boundaries matter the most. Even if you can't physically leave, emotional distance becomes your lifeline. Before we talk about the how of setting boundaries, we have to talk about the heartbreak of it because it's not just about learning the right phrases or sticking to your guns. It's about learning to tolerate the uncomfortable emotions that come with choosing yourself, possibly for the first time ever. You might hear no, you might not like it, and the guilt hits first. That sinking feeling that tells you you're being selfish, that maybe you owe them more of your time, your energy, your forgiveness. You'll hear that inner voice whispering something like, what if they're trying? What if you're giving up too soon? And if you've spent a lifetime putting other people's needs ahead of your own, the guilt feels like truth. It feels like your reality. And like maybe you're doing something wrong by finally honoring your limits. And I promise you, you're not. Then comes the fear, not just fear of their reaction, but fear of losing connection, fear of not being lovable, fear that this will be the moment they walk away forever, and fear that your boundary will be misunderstood or twisted into something ugly and mean something bad about you. And for a lot of us, the fear hits deep. It keeps us from taking action because if love always came with conditions, then boundaries feel like ripping the cord that's barely holding it all together. And then the grief, because weirdly enough, boundaries can bring loss of fantasy, loss of illusion, loss of some perceived notion, and maybe the version of the relationship you hoped it could become. That was one of the hardest parts for me, letting go of the dream, the hope for the future, realizing that the version of him I kept holding out that hope for only existed in small glimpses and long ago memories, and mainly existed only in my mind. I was slowly dying while waiting for someone who existed only in my mind. So, no, boundaries aren't just an act of empowerment, they're also an act of warning. When it's hard, when it hurts, when it feels like you can't do it anymore, be gentle with yourself. This isn't easy. This is a lifeline. And before you can speak the words or enforce the limits, you have to be willing to sit with those feelings, to let them move through your body without letting them hijack your choices. You have to get clear about what you need, even if it's complicated, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. You don't have to be cold. You don't have to shut off your heart, but you do have to accept that loving someone does not mean letting them harm you. You're allowed to love them and still create distance. You can feel sad and still say enough is enough. You are absolutely allowed to want peace more than you want to be understood. That's what prepares you to hold your boundaries. Not just knowledge, but practice. Because the truth is, you don't need their permission to start protecting your peace. You just need a little support, a little bravery, and maybe a little strategy, which is exactly where the gray rock method comes in. Tool, the gray rock method. The gray rock method is exactly what it sounds like. Imagine a boring, dull, lifeless gray rock. Unremarkable, sitting on the ground. It's not flashy. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't react. It just is. And that's the energy that you take on when you're dealing with someone who thrives on chaos, control, and emotional manipulation. This isn't about being fake. It's about keeping your energy safe and protected from those who want to mess with it. When you start using the gray rock method, you stop offering up the juicy emotional reactions that toxic people feed on. You don't argue. You don't explain yourself. You don't get stuck in these conversations where you're going around 100 different ways. You stop trying to get them to understand your perspective. You become neutral, calm, unshakable. And listen, this doesn't just work with romantic exes. This is for your manipulative mother-in-law who loves to twist your words. This is for your boss who picks fights just to assert control. This is for your sibling who always has a subtle dig laced into every conversation. This is for the ex you're co-parenting with who sends you long texts baiting you into an argument. When you stop feeding the drama, you starve the dysfunction until there's nothing left for it to feed on. It might sound simple, but it's not always easy, especially at first. When you're used to reacting because you're human and humans want to defend themselves and be understood, it's hard to take a step back. We want justice, but some people don't play fair. And every time you try to reason with someone who doesn't want to reason, you're just draining yourself and your own energy. So here's how it looks in real life. When they send a text laced with blame and half-truths, you respond with just the necessary info. Pickup is at 5 p.m. No emotion, no explaining, no defending. When your mom makes another passive-aggressive comment at dinner, you shrug, change the subject, or say nothing at all. When your coworker tries to bait you into gossip, you give one-word answers and pivot to a work-related topic. It's all about no emotion, no details, short and sweet. You're not being rude. You're being intentional. You're taking your power back by refusing to participate in their game. You're not feeding into it anymore. And don't be surprised if that causes them to push back when you start. People who are used to controlling you with guilt or chaos will not go quietly. They might double down. They might accuse you of being cold, selfish, dramatic. They might say they miss the old you. They'll do whatever they can to get a rise out of you, but don't take the bait. You can remind yourself, their feelings are not your responsibility. I'm going to say that one more time. Their feelings are not your responsibility. Their confusion is not for you to clarify. Their opinion of you is not your truth. And the beautiful thing is, the longer that you practice the gray rock method, the more peace you start to feel. Not because you changed, or not because they've changed, because you have. You've learned to stop feeding into their bullshit. You start to see through the manipulation instead of getting tangled in it. You feel more grounded, more clear, more like yourself. And you begin to realize that you never owed them that access in the first place. Boundaries don't always start with no. Sometimes they start with silence. Sometimes they start with less energy, less explanation, less emotional leakage. The gray rock method is about being free, not about being numb. Tool summary: the gray rock method in real life. You're going to keep it brief and stick to the facts. No long explanations, no emotional commentary. Pick up as at 5. Yes, no, not available. That's enough right there. You're going to stay neutral. No matter how outrageous the message, don't match the energy. Keep your tone calm, your face neutral, and your replies boring. You're going to pivot or disengage. You don't have to stay in uncomfortable conversations. Change the subject, simply walk away, or just don't respond. You're going to stop taking the bait. You aren't here to prove your point anymore. You already know the truth, and that's enough. And you're going to use your exit plan. If things escalate or feel unsafe, have a plan to remove yourself physically or emotionally. Safety first, always. This work is brave. Let me say that again. You are brave for even reading this, for even considering boundaries, for even dreaming of a life with more peace and less chaos. Whether you're still in the thick of it, slowly detaching, or rebuilding after the storm, you are doing great. This chapter isn't about becoming heartless or cold or selfish. It's about how to learn how to protect the heart that you have worked so hard to heal and reclaim. And if it still feels awkward or heavy or exhausting right now, that's okay. It won't always. Like any muscle, your boundaries get stronger the more you use them. One boring text, one no thanks, one deep breath at a time. You're building a new way of living. You don't owe anyone access to you just because they miss the version of you that they once controlled. You owe yourself a life that feels safe, centered, and free. And you're getting there. Thank you so much for being here with me today, reading this chapter and taking time for yourself to learn about these tools. And I really just trust and pray that these words find the people that they're meant for, because that's what this work is all about. Sharing these things from my life and sharing these tools and writing this fucking book is about literally saving. It's life-saving work. Leaving relationships like this saves lives. And even if it wasn't that you were in a relationship that was so dangerous that you were at risk of, that your life was at risk, but your life is at risk when you stay in relationships that silence you and make you have to be someone else. So you can't live in those relationships. So yes, if you are in a relationship that you cannot live in and fully be you and be free, then save yourself and get out. Thank you so much for being here. Till tomorrow. Love you, mean it.